record, so we'll figure out a way to use it.
Okay, can you hear me now? My name is John Graybeal. I'm the technical program manager of the BioPortal and CEDAR programs at Stanford Center for Biomedical Informatics Research. We actually have what I like to call semantic metadata stack. It started with Protege, the software that lets you build ontologies or terminologies. That was about, 15 years ago. BioPortal was about 15 years ago. And CEDAR is our most recent part of the stack, which is dealing with metadata. And it's a heavy user of the BioPortal system, which I will now describe. And I won't say all this much about myself other than to say there's a lot of metadata and semantics kind of stuff in my puttering about. And I've been involved in more than this ontology repository. There have been a few others that are in my past and current. I wanted to start with a little anecdote. The problem we always face is what terms are we going to use for our project, for whatever the project is, management. And I end up calling this the 5 stages of semantic grief. Because when someone's working on that project, the first thing they come to is denial and just say, we'll just have them type in whatever they want. So pretty soon say, fine, all right, that's not going to work. We'll create a list of words that they can use, and that'll make it easier. And finally, let's start bargaining and say, well, let's see if there's a list out there, because the list of words is getting too hard to maintain, and it's really taking up a lot of our time. We'll just go grab one. And then after that doesn't work so well, we start getting depressed. So we're going to create our own vocabulary, because there's just nothing that's good enough for us. And then they start trying to create their own vocabulary, and they have to start making all these technical choices. And how are we ever going to do this? Actually, this is sort of where we might be here. I'm not saying I don't know this community that well yet, but you decide. And then finally, from the standpoint of the big system, when the system is really getting mature, the acceptance stage is, let's just take some of these existing vocabularies, and then for these cases, we'll take our own terms, and then we can blend these over here. It almost always ends up being a blending process, in my experience. So the tools end up having to be built around that and so on. I think you all are in an excellent place doing what you're doing now, given what I've been hearing about what you have, where you're trying to go. This is the right time to have these discussions. I just wanted to say that up front, that I'm really excited to be here at this moment, as opposed to really early or really late in the process. So I want to talk about the history of BioPortal just a little bit, the features of interest for the what I'm calling your semantic stack, deployments that we've already done with BioPortal or that other people have done, more specifically with the BioPortal system, the requirements of the system under those the different kinds of adoption models that you might use if you wanted to use BioPortal for your research, and some thoughts that I had. You'll quickly figure out that I'm a little bit free and loose. I know a little something about metadata and semantics, but if you're looking for rigor, you'll have to write the paper. I'm not so strong at getting everything exactly right. So feel free to question anything I say. Just wanted to give you a visual of what BioPortal looks like if you haven't played with it before. That's just the front page, and key points about it is it has a lot of ontologies in it, a lot of classes in it, terms, getting close to 10 million now, and pretty good ability to search for terms and for ontologies in the system. So the NCBO BioPortal was started about 2004, 2005, funded with the National Institutes of Health grant. And the goal at the time was to represent biomedical knowledge, the concepts of the biomedical community, all in one place. I think there are a whole bunch of other goals. It was a much longer proposal than I'm describing. But the goal was, as I see it, looking retrospectively at it, was to emphasize practicality, features that the system could provide over semantic fidelity. You may spot in this talk some cases where you'll say, wait, that doesn't make sense. If you know your semantic AL and RDF and all those things with some rigor, some of the things we do aren't quite perfect with respect to that. And so the goal was to create the tools and give access to these concepts in a way that was really useful to people, and it's been extremely successful in that regard. So it got really significant funding over the first 12 years. We're talking tens of millions of dollars over the first 12 years, and it got a lot of development. So there are a lot of features, a little bit of a researchy kind of feel about it because it has a lot of features. And it also has a deployable appliance. The software can be deployed on some other site and used by that community. It started as a relational system, migrated a couple years back, 5 years back, 8 years back, to a triple store backend, if you know what that is. It's just a different framework for storing your information. Maybe some of it someday will migrate back toward relational, we'll see. The point is it's an evolving system, and it's a system that gets improved over time as new ideas come along. So while it's originally focused on biomedicine, it's now really branching out into other areas. And we'll talk a little bit about that. It has over 700 community ontologies, as I mentioned, most of those biomedical, an extremely large user base. I just did the Google Analytics and came up with something like 3.5 million unique users over 5 years. So it's a lot of different users. It hasn't gotten any recent funding from the NIH for a few years now. That's not great from our standpoint. So we're pursuing different kinds of sustainability strategies for it. Feel free to volunteer any sustainability strategies or just money. Given limited money that's available for infrastructure in all of these communities, including yours, I'm sure, we're also looking to broaden the branding that we have. And so this large number of deployments that are represented by a couple of different screenshots in the upper right caused us to propose and put forth the idea of the UltraPortal Alliance, which is this community of people using this great software resource who can both help each other and potentially pursue new kinds of funding support based on the fact that there's this great tool that everybody's using. So that's just starting, as you'll see if you go to ultraportal.org. In the meantime, thanks to support from Stanford, BioPortal gets a lot of ongoing support. We have 2.25 full-time people working on it. It has something a little bit north of 99.5% uptime. That's our goal, and most months we make it. We are working on new triple store capability to replace the current rather dated one. And we have a support list, so if you actually do have a problem, you can write it to the support list and we will attempt to figure out what the problem is. Which it turns out is really important. We talked about maintainability in the sense of a particular ontology. If you have 700 of them, it's amazing how many things can go wrong and how much maintenance you have to do. So these are the snapshots of the public instances of BioPortal, if you like. BioPortal itself is in the upper left, and I'll just go through, oh no, I'll just use this to go through it. A little bit later, I think I have all of these represented in a little more detail. And if I don't, I talk pretty faster, so that's okay too. But there's some that are language translations of the biomedical content. AgriPortal has been mentioned here before. And EcoPortal is a new one that's just started up. So, and there's BioPortal, which I will probably have to say a few more words about, that we started with the Stanford Library community. Picture of the amount of usage. This is over a roughly 3, almost 4-year period. The number of page views is increasing pretty dramatically lately. We think there's a particular ontology we have that's getting a lot of those page views from people actually needing to enter procedure codes, and they found this is a good way to find the procedure codes. The number of monthly users, we're approximating about 170,000 users per month now. That's just people who are using the user interface. All of the features are provided via the API as well. And so we're getting upwards of a few million API requests or that we have to service a day, each day. And so that ends up to be about 100 million a month now. Basically, the point of that is that it's a really big and complex and scaled up system. You won't be tested on this. We'll come back to mention it at the end. And actually, when I had to come up with a list of what are all the features you'd want in an ontology repository, it turns out, or that you might want, it turns out a very large number of them are actually in BioPortal. And it's not just ontologies, of course, it's vocabularies, and I think it'll be good to come back to that list as a means of evaluating what you might want as you manage many of your vocabularies and other resources. So there are a lot of tools in the system, and I'll mention them very quickly, and also some widgets that can be put into other web pages just by themselves. As I mentioned, they're all available via the API. One of the key functions is the ability to submit an ontology. Anyone can come submit an ontology to BioPortal, any kind of ontology. We don't go in and we don't actually monitor it very closely at all, except when we found out that a lot of people were submitting spam ontologies, which I thought was fascinating. We would go that far. Come back to that. You can browse the ontologies, obviously. I selected a biblio slice category down here, so you're seeing some of the bibliographic ontologies that are already in BioPortal. You might recognize CI there at the end. Sorry, CI. Then you can see details about any ontology that is put into the system. You can look at terms and the specific properties or annotations associated with those terms. I threw this in there for enjoyment of that word, awareness of one of the things that you may run into in the case of CI, which is that we're not really good with multilingual issues, internationalization issues right now. So there are bugs on this that we really need to do the proper pref label, not just any pref label in our tree. And I think it'll get fixed in due course. Annotations are the capability to take a string and then say, tell me what all of the important words are in this string. Give me the precise identifiers for those words from particular ontologies. So you can see for this string, melanoma is the first word that it's found matches for. This is pretty much a syntactic search. But it found melanoma in a whole lot of different things. In that one string, it found 355 matches. That takes you to the question fairly quickly of how would I choose? Which of these different melanomas do I want to use? And we have an app for that. The ontology recommender is a system that you can plug in a string again, or keywords, and say, please tell me all the ontologies that can help find those terms and define those terms. It's actually really good. You can get an idea from the different kinds of measurements we're doing, how sophisticated it is. And it can do whole sets of ontologies. Give me the 3 best in combination ontologies to find all those terms, which is useful when you have some very detailed things mixed in with some broader things. It does a number of mappings automatically. When you put in an ontology, looking for exact matches of the identifiers, as well as the CUIs we mentioned earlier in the UMLS case. And then Loom is syntactic matches that it's finding on its own, just looking for string matches, essentially. And it also can accept user-entered mappings and will display those in this as well. There is a resource index. PubMed is the only resource that's currently indexed against all of the terms in BioPortal. This may go away because you can find these kinds of resources elsewhere. So up here we're going to keep maintaining the resource index in BioPortal. I mentioned there's the ability to take it and install it somewhere else. That's what we call the virtual appliance. It is pretty sophisticated, includes a lot of the basic features, especially valuable if you want to really hit the system hard, because we limit how hard you can hit the system if you're not our actual user interface itself. There's a number of other features that are more social or organizational. You can describe the project that you're working on and then which ontologies it's using. There are slices which are based on the category of ontologies, all the things in a particular category. There are groups of ontologies, and you can actually go to the group and only be viewing ontologies for that restricted set, from that group's restricted set. Views are the ability to create an ontology that's based on another ontology. If you create that kind of ontology, you check the box. And now we know there's not really anything new there. It's just a subset of some other ontology. There's a few expert rankings. That hasn't been a heavily used feature, but the capability is there if you want to submit a ranking. And there's the ability to enter notes on ontologies and terms, and even request changes to ontologies and terms. Again, that hasn't been heavily used, although we're updating it some, and we're going to see if that makes a difference in how heavily it's used. Yes, so we'll talk briefly about the deployments. AgriPortal was mentioned. That's agricultural ontologies. There's over 100 of them now in the AgriPortal system. That's run out of the LIRMM in France. And EcoPortal is another new system that is part of the LifeWatch project in the EU, run out of Italy. And it is just starting up, just has a few ontologies. But both that and AgriPortal each have one FTE of funding for the next year or two to support and improve and curate the system. They have more money than we do. CIFR is the French translation that I mentioned earlier of biomedical things, also run by Clément Champé in France. MedPortal is a new Chinese portal, a translation again of biomedical content. And BioPortal is the project we did in collaboration with the Stanford libraries on the LD4P project. And it was more or less an experiment. We ran it for them. They asked us for a quote on how much it would cost to keep running it. We'll come back to that. But for now, we're just continuing to keep it up as best we can. You can visit these, this one's at biblio.ontoportal.org, and actually play with it and try to submit things, but don't do it this week, because when I did it yesterday, submissions are not accepted at the moment. So, well, that one is on a we get around to it when we get around to it basis, because it's more there for interest and testing than anything. So those are the major non-BioPortal deployments, and as it's okay to experiment with BioPortal, it's actually okay to experiment with BioPortal as well. Just keep your ontology private if it's really just an experimental one, so that it doesn't interfere with the others. The virtual client software I'll mention a little more about, because that may be of particular interest. This can be downloaded as a VMware virtual appliance. OVF is the format we refer to. You request it, we give you access. We've had 44 requests. We know at least 11 of those are active, a few more maybe. It's also runnable as an Amazon Web Service AMI. There are 30 instances out there that are running right now. We unfortunately have no idea who they are. Can't figure out a way to figure that out, which is sad, but the next version will be able to figure that out. We can install it and even maintain it as a service as well. There is a significant upgrade to the, what we now call the Untitled virtual appliance. That's a bit of the rebranding they talked about. That will improve the ability to deploy the system yourself, and for the system to call home and say, oh, hello, there's an upgrade that you can get. And it will include a lot of the latest UIs and APIs, bug fixes, so forth. I mentioned we're replacing the triple store, Allegrograph is the new one that we are testing out now. See if we can replace the unsupported triple store that we have. So let's say you wanted to actually use this as a tool in your system. How would you do that? Or for your purposes? Maybe just to store the vocabularies, take advantage of the mappings, whatever. Maybe as a complete community representation of all the things that you're doing. Option one, you use the system that's already there. It's free support. If you have some feature like you just want to add a category for your groups, and you can just see your group's things that are of interest to your group, we can probably just do that for you. Just let us know. Other features, maybe we would actually need funding to do for you. But you have lots of company. There are a lot of people using the system, and so it's a pretty good deal, all in all. There are a few cons. You can't really brand that system very well, or at all. You only get to make 15 API requests per second, which is not a big deal if you're not getting the heavy-duty analysis or downloading of content. But if you're starting to get into the 100,000 term or million term categories, a few of these have million plus terms, and people want to look at them all. 15 times per second isn't quite fast enough. You could roll your own and deploy one of these virtual appliances that I just described. We estimate that, I estimate, that you would probably want pretty close to one full-time person to get through the installation. Isn't that hard to get it up and running at basic level, but you want to change it a little to put your branding on it. And then as people start putting ontologies, they'll start asking questions about how to do that, and you'll need to support that. And so basically over time, it ends up being a resource to keep the software running. Once in a long while, it'll need a restart or a little bit of diagnostics. If you had a really sharp person, you could get away with less than one FTE. We still offer support for people who do that, obviously. And ideally, with our new Untitled Alliance, we would have you participate in the Untitled Alliance as sort of a full member and someone who's eager to contribute to the betterment of the whole. Option 3 is we deploy, and maybe if you want support and curate an appliance for you to use, an instance of the appliance for you to use. And so, just to throw a number out there, because I got this question a few times as I was talking to organizers about what they wanted to hear. To give you a framework, if you were to say, how much would it cost us for you to deploy this and keep it running at a basic level? Don't quote me on this, but I would say you're talking in the neighborhood of bare bones minimum, maybe $2,500 a month. If you want really full support where every time it goes down, we noticed it within minutes and we get on it and get it back up, and we're actually helping to curate things and helping resolve issues and so on and so forth, getting the software upgraded instantly every time we upgrade the main system, then that would be significantly more. It's definitely a non-trivial system to really keep in great operational health 24/7. So just want you to be aware of that. If you do it at Stanford, you could do it either we deploy here at Stanford or at your own facility. You probably wouldn't care that much about where it's deployed, but it could affect the cost a little bit because we're used to working with our systems, not with yours. So those are our negotiables. I'll throw in some thoughts that you can take for what they're worth. I already mentioned I think you're doing this at the ideal time and in the ideal way. I would argue that things that look expensive now, and I wasn't watching closely enough to see if people flinched when I said $2,500 a month. You can flinch now for me if you would like that. They're not going to look so expensive later when you figure out how you're going to do all the things you want to do with the terminologies you're trying to work with, and people keep changing them, coming up with new ones, you have to keep operating them and so forth. So systematic approaches, deciding which standards you would like people to follow with their ontologies, with their vocabularies, that's going to save you so much. If you can tell people, this is what we've agreed, all the people in our community who are using all these vocabularies, we really want to work with them in either this format or this format, please. There will be people who will start putting them in that format just because you said that. And over time, that number will grow if you present a repository that is advertising for them and that is good outreach for them. So just at that level, making decisions, it's going to save you effort in the long run. I'm guessing here, because I haven't studied everything that you have, but just from the feel of the conversation and reviewing some of the materials, it feels like you have a lot of content that's pretty well structured and is therefore easily convertible within reason to standard formats. And we can dig into that more, obviously, and I think this afternoon maybe that'll be discussed a little bit. There are always outliers. You can ask me about an ethics vocabulary that was given to me in PDF form that, wasn't going to be easily convertible in this century, but the outliers are fairly unusual, and you can always decide maybe we won't do that. Maybe that's just not going to be a part of it. Most of the big ones that I've heard talked about today are structured, and in fact, Seattle, for instance, is already there. As I say, declaring standards will encourage people to adopt those standards for you. They'll put their things in the format. They may even submit it into your repository if you encourage them to do that, and save you all that trouble. And so doing things systematically and maybe in a larger, more structured way than you might naturally walk in thinking you want to do, I think it can pay off. It takes a while. It took BioPortal, by the end of 5 years, it only had like 250 vocabularies or so. The next 5 years, it's basically been about a steady rate of 250 vocabularies every 5 years. And then I mentioned earlier that if you go back to the features slide, you can actually say, for each of those features, what are our interests? And I could even give you a more complete list of features BioPortal doesn't have, so you can think if any of those matter, but most of them I think wouldn't. The more features you have, the more powerful your system as a whole. It becomes possible for people to study the relationships of things based on the relationships of other things. The more features you have, the more that will encourage more assets, more vocabularies and ontologies to come into the system. So it comes out a little like a sales pitch, which is not really why I put it in that way. I think it's just a good way for you to orient yourselves around what might be of value to you over time. Yeah, these are don't ask me to give you a proof on any of these. My opinions are there is no one vocabulary or ontology to rule them all. I think we sort of heard flavors of that in the conversation we just heard about the different things that might serve as a core ontology or a core for how everything gets mapped. The deeper the ontology gets, the more levels it gets, or the more sophisticated it gets, and the more domain specific it gets, the less consensus you'll get on its terms. As you get into research areas that are relatively new, there is no consensus on terms. The more dynamic the research, the less stable the terms are in the domain. You all probably all know some of these. I apologize. Some of this, I don't mean to be patronizing. I just didn't have a good sense of what to say. If you don't agree, if you're having trouble agreeing on labels for things as you're developing what's intended to be a common vocabulary, forget about the labels. Focus on the definitions and put the meaning in the definitions. And the labels can just be codes for the purposes, because different people can use different labels if they need to. For the 20 years I've been involved in this kind of work, we've always talked about evaluating things, and there have been things like the recommender that evaluate the quality of vocabularies or the usefulness of vocabularies, the relevance of vocabularies. That industry, if I can call it that, that activity of evaluating vocabularies is just about to take off in a big way. There are a lot of projects that are making them more fair, evaluating their quality, making recommendations. So you can take advantage of that. You can expect that to be really in good shape in 5 years. No ontology or vocabulary is ever finished. No ontology or vocabulary is ever perfect. So you can expect change, and you'll need to manage the change. And I mentioned dynamic research means instability, or means more change. Finally, this one really bugs me. Maybe you all can help me with this. You're all word people. Does anyone have a word for terminology artifact that definitely includes ontologies and vocabularies and thesauri? I use ontologies. Man, that makes some people mad. Man, I lost the proposal because the person said, they don't know what they're talking about because they said ontologies, but clearly these are just vocabularies. Fine. If you have a good word for this, I really, really want it. That's all I have. Yeah, so happy to take questions, and you're also welcome to email me offline with questions or comments or whatever. And I'd really like to compliment Marcia on the first presentation and thank her for bringing me into this group, because I feel like I'm with my peeps here. It's really great. Thanks. So, questions? Good. You understood it all perfectly, and you know exactly what you're doing. Okay. This you can get the slides from right there if you want. Yeah.
Does it run on Linux or Windows or?
Linux. Yes.
Which, does it matter which version?
CentOS is the one that we use, and so that would be easiest. People have done it to work on other systems, if I'm not mistaken.
What sort of resources are required IT-wise to get to work test on a small scale?
Well, so I've had people bring it down and have it running within a matter of, well, if you're lucky and you're familiar with these kinds of things, broadly within a day. A more typical range, I think, is on the order of a couple days to a week to work out various things, and you start tailoring the banner and the names of the path and so on, all the usual customizations that you want to do. And then sometimes things come up that can take longer, and we have the support list and we try to respond to those. So usually it doesn't go on and on and on, except that as you decide, if you decide you want to actively maintain the software so that you can make changes to it, whether user interface or more fundamental features or whatever, that ends up being quite a bit richer challenge. Definitely doable. So BioPortal was developed with on average one person over, let's say, 2 to 3 years. And it has a significant number of enhancements and bug fixes, that, some of which we've ported back and some of which we haven't. So you can get by with one person.
Can you run it on the laptop? Do you need a workstation?
Yeah, our developers develop on their laptops. Yeah. Our system runs on, I think it's 23 virtual machines, something like that. It's getting a whole lot of hits. But BioPortal, I think, runs on one. So it's very operable. You need a fair amount of memory. But these days, it's not hard to get a laptop that's smoothly outfitted. Yeah, can definitely try it.
If you go to the BioPortal, I will show them one example on the BioPortal.
To the actual system, you mean?
Yeah, can we do that?
Yes, we can. Why don't you go ahead and ask your question?
Browser
It
and
will. I've heard of browsers.
go to the browser.
Don't worry, I'll make it bigger.
So I think one of the features we didn't talk about is also the management of and the usage of any of them. If you can browse a lot of ontologies, of course, or by a particular name. Medical subject heading, for example, right? MASH, everyone knows MASH. So it's so critical that not only the basic information, but also visit the version, the submitted version. You can see how it's updated. But I like that mostly is the rating, people rate that, and also the project that using this vocabulary. If we know this, who are using that, the conservation community, what vocabulary, what you can actually get to the project that you want to explore. So I think that this is one of the major. Also in the individual ones, in addition to show the classes, show the hierarchies and definitions, everything, it also can see the mapping and visualize where is your term belong to and where they are. Just this incredible functional in this. And the mapping with the other things. And sometimes you see, subject headings or thesaurus, they are not ontology originally, but they use this tool to show that using all ontology property. For example, one class disjoint with, if you belong here, you cannot belong to there. So those are functional in this BioPortal. I just feel, yes, if you go to the ontologies and you search.
Could you call them knowledge
Functions
structures?
just incredible, huh?
Well, I'm just thinking from ontologies and vocabularies and thesaurus, knowledge structures, and like, give you an umbrella big enough.
Yeah, knowledge artifacts is sometimes, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so I think there are also the rating of the.
Some of them
star.
have ratings based
The
on the
star.
reviews that people have entered, yes.
And I also saw some experimental ones, just first version, that people can just submit that,
Yes.
even though usage.
I actually encourage people to
Mhm.
manage your ontologies online in a public place, the things you're working on online in a public place, so that people can see and know about what you're working on and provide feedback to you and connect with you. It's a great advertisement and communication for communities. Yeah.
I have two sort of practical questions. For the ontologies that are deployed at Stanford and maintained by you, are they backed up together? Is there control of the ontologies and backups, those kinds of things for long-term sustainability is sort of what I'm concerned of, since you've been honest about some of the financial issues for something as large as that. How does that get managed, and what would be the security of the data in that sense?
So, excuse me, we have all the standard system administration backup processes in place. That's obviously local to us. One of the reasons I wanted to create the Untitled Alliance is to start discussing things like that with the other people in the Alliance, to say, we could have agreements with other participants to take over for us. And we have, I'm going to call it an informal agreement. We haven't gone down to formally negotiating anything with the managers of the AgriPortal system, that if we needed to, if we became unable to take care of this, they could take over the BioPortal system and content if need be. But we haven't gone so far as some groups have to actually put that in writing in a formal document, which I think is a valuable step.
And do the ontologies get backed up separately or all together? How do you, what's the level of independence, I suppose, in these ontologies that you're managing?
They're all in one in one store, one computer store, but each one has its own directory of information associated with it, including the ontology itself. So the ontologies are all managed independently, if you like, and then each of the submissions of the ontology has its own directory for its log and so forth. So that is
And then, sorry, this is a little non sequitur going in a different direction. Then the other thing I'm a little bit interested in is how you handle things. When you mentioned issues with translations, I'm not sure if you were talking about the interface and the labels or translations within the ontologies.
We're not paragons in either case. We present some of the information of the multiple labels that are offered, but not all of it. I think there can be multiple prep labels, and we only present one. The one we present is a little bit random. So the one that's in the tree is a little bit random. So the way we present the ontologies is not internationalized, the way that RDF would allow you to internationalize it, and some of these actually take advantage of that. We also do not have an internationalized interface. I'm trying to think if AgriPortal, I don't believe AgriPortal does either. I don't think CFR does either. I don't think anyone has internationalized the interface yet. Obviously, that's something that would be really nice to do.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, when you did the quick search now, and the term came up with 6 or 7 mappings to other ontologies. The question is, who matched them? Who did the mappings?
So It is, yeah, I won't be able to find that quickly, but I can tell you the answer. It's a mix. There are 2 or 3 identifiers. The unique term, the full unique term identifier, global unique identifier that's already associated with the term, CUIs, and one other that I'm not thinking of right now, that can be used to do those mappings. Those are all done automatically when it's submitted. Then we do a syntactic search for something that looks like the same thing, and that's just syntactic. And we do that automatically when it's brought in. Anything that has the same string of characters in it, we're going to say, that looks like a match, and we offer those as potential matches. Then different individuals or groups can do their own mappings offline and submit those mappings, and we also present those. And as you look at each mapping, you can see which type it is, and actually get full information on that mapping via the API or via the user interface to find out how it is done.
Yeah, so you do the automatic matching based on the different types of matches you said when the submission happens, but
Yes.
the sort of more valid, if you want,
Yes, the
human
curated mappings are
happens in
done
advance. Yeah.
whenever or offline. Yeah, typically it's long after we've got the ontology, somebody will submit some mappings for that ontology.
Yeah, okay, so then I was wondering if I don't know if it's the right question actually, but the way that this tool shows the different mappings,
Mm-hmm.
or the way that the different ontologies have been combined, can we match that to one of the options that you showed in your presentation? So is any of your options what we see here?
This is based on the registry that people put things there.
Yes.
Lots of them have already done the mapping,
Yeah.
like the National Library, the Cancer Institute have its own way mapped to UMLS, that matter. So maybe I'm not sure in other fields that the CSORI already finished this kind of task. Yeah. It's also in the whole BioPortal, you can first search by class. So I was searching by conservation and see which vocabulary has that class. Also. Yeah.
Can I just ask? It's one of terminology, and you've indicated at the end, because I was slightly interested as to an ontology in its sort of most extreme sense, with millions of classes, and the fact that at least you've got a vocabulary in there with millions of terms. So it's the notion when you start to take that down is that if you've got something that says it's got a certain number of classes, does that mean there's a certain number of, if it's a vocabulary, there's a certain number of terms in the vocabulary?
It generally, the way, and you may have more insight, you may have worked with us closely enough to be able to refine my answer. Generally, we attempt to normalize the input so that the number of classes that you see listed is really the number, if it's SCOS, it's really the number of terms. We actually will interpret the individuals in SCOS as classes in order to normalize that relationship, if you like. And so typically the number of classes is an indication of the number of terms, yes.
Because the number of